garage. Let's do this. It's time to get this new monster clutch installed and get the TR6060 bolted to the LQ9 and maybe even set it in the car. We'll see how far we get before I get pulled out of the garage to go do house stuff. So I'm gonna get to work and yeah, enjoy guys. Let's get this thing in. Hit a sticking point. I was measuring the slave cylinder to clutch clearance to see if I needed to get a shim, and the numbers that I'm getting really don't make sense. I'm getting a negative shim size, which means that the slave cylinder with no shims is sitting too far proud. So I've measured it a whole bunch of times. I've pulled the clutch off and the flywheel off and reinstalled them, and I'm getting the same numbers over and over again. I've measured with multiple flat edges, multiple straight edges. I used that one originally, and then I moved to using this one. No difference. I've turned the motor over. Maybe it wasn't straight, and turned it, same thing. So basically what you do here, let's go what you do is you measure from your flywheel or from your bell housing surface to the bearing surface here, and you do that with the spring out of it, which it is, and you take that number, you write it down, and then you measure from the fingers on the clutch here and what the distance is to the mating surface here, and then you write that down. And what I'm getting, roughly the same when I've done this a whole bunch of times. So this number should be bigger than this number, and then that gives you your shim size, but I'm getting a negative. And yeah, this is the instructions for Monster. I originally did it in inches like a dummy, but even when I converted it, it still got me the same deal. But yeah, so you measure this, fully compressed, measure the distance from the slave cylinder release bearing face to the mounting surface of the bell housing where the engine block, record in block A. That's this guy. And then measure B, distance from the back of the engine block surface where the bell housing would mate to the installed clutch diaphragm spring tip. Record as B. And then it says right here, A should never be smaller than B. A is smaller than B every time I measure it. I've measured it a lot more times than I wrote down. I stopped getting up and coming over here and writing them down because I can tell if this is, if it's generally close and that's generally close, and I have the same problem. So email the tech support for Monster, and one of the guys got back to me pretty quick. I made him a video of how I'm measuring it and all of that, so I'm just waiting for him to get back to me. But probably not going to get the engine and the transmission bolted together today. I'm kind of lucky that I actually did this, because part of me was like, F it, send it. The clutch came with the flywheel. The clutch came with the slave cylinder release support, the billet one. It's all made to go together. Just send it. I'm glad I didn't, because if these measurements are correct, then there's going to be 30 thousandths of pressure on the clutch. So it's almost like driving around with your foot on the pedal, like pushing the clutch pedal in a little bit. And I know that it would have slipped and it would have burned the clutch up, so I'm glad that I did this. But I'm just waiting to hear back from Monster Tech Support on what they think. Maybe I'm measuring it wrong. I don't know. I could be measuring it wrong. I don't know. But if they get back to me pretty quick, I will jump in and give you an update. If not, I'm going to call it for the day. And I got to. So this is how I'm getting my measurement for the bell housing to the slave. Using this straight edge. Set the inches, zeroed. Okay, I got 3.051, and I do have the spring removed from the slave. And then we'll go to the engine. So the one thing I'm not sure of, the instructions say to measure to the fingers, which is what I've been doing. I guess the measurement would be even worse if I measured to like the outermost part of the clutch, which is this ring here. So I'm going to measure to the fingers. And the way that I'm doing this, zero this guy out. So I'm placing this across here, like that. Making sure it's nice and flat. And I'm measuring the distance between here and the fingers. All right, so now I'm going to zero it. And now I'm going to measure 3.318. So that's how I'm doing it, and yeah, I'm not sure. I've taken the clutch off and reinstalled it and retorqued everything. I don't have a spacer on the crank because it did come with one. This was a LQ9, so it had like the spacer for the 4L80. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I appreciate any help. Thanks. All right, guys, I got a box in the mail from Monster Clutches, and let's see what we got here. So I was having trouble shimming, measuring for the shim on the slave cylinder. I was getting a negative shim size, which is not a possible thing. And then I contacted tech support at Monster Clutches. I got in a hold of Daniel over there, and he was very helpful. I made a video of how I'm measuring and sent it to him. We spoke back and forth a couple times and determined that my slave cylinder is not depressing all the way. So I still have this gap here. So he said that's because he's seen this with the cheap Chinese slave cylinders, which I think is what this is. Here's all the other parts for it. So what I did is I picked up, not this, that's a welding consumables thing. I picked up the finest made in Mexico slave cylinder. I got this from Monster Clutches, and they sent it out like the very next day. Daniel actually sent me an email, said that he saw this going out to me and grabbed it before it left and checked to make sure that the sleeve depresses fully. So I shouldn't have any problems. So I just have to go ahead and install the billet guide sleeve into this slave cylinder and install it on trans and get going. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then we'll remeasure. Hopefully we won't have any further issues. So I'm going to separate all the parts from the other slave and get them out of the way. I do want to say that the tech support with Monster Clutch was on point. I got a response within like an hour of when I sent an email, back and forth, pretty much like a live conversation through email. Very helpful, and thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it. So, pull this off just like we did on the other one. We're going to pop the little cover off the top of here. There it is. And then we can take this guy off. Let me get a glove on. We're going to put a little grease on there. Even though there's actually grease on it. We greased it when we put it on the other one. But, put gloves on anyway. Why not? So hopefully, don't have any further issues with this one. So when you measure, they want you to pull the spring out. So I'm gonna check this out. Look at that, fully depressed. And let me grab the other one, and I can show you the difference. And this is after I hit this with a mallet a few times. You can see this gap here, and that's the size of the shim. It was saying that I needed to take away with a negative shim size, so that's that'll make it up. Here is the new slave, perfectly flush. So happy to see that. That tells me right now that we shouldn't have any further issues. I am going to transfer. Oh, okay. I'm going to transfer this over to the other slave cylinder. I have this adapter piece for the adapters that I have to run the BMW clutch master cylinder. I need this piece. Give it to me. Yeah. There it is. And we don't need that. This is going to snap right in here. There we go. And then I'm going to change this guy. Need to get a 2. So we don't need this because we're running this remote bleeder setup. And I'm going to put that on after we measure. So there we go. This guy is going to go on here. And now we're going to bolt this to the transmission, and we'll get our measurements. Hopefully we don't need a shim, because if we do, then we can't put this together. Not that I don't think I'm going to actually put this together today anyway. I don't really have the time. I just have the time just to get the shim measurement. Okay, so now I need to put a straight edge here, and I'm going to measure the distance from the straight edge to this bearing surface with the slave cylinder fully depressed. So it's from the mating surface to there. To do that, I'm going to use my Harbor Freight there sliding caliper. So this will hook onto there. Actually, let me zero it. 0. I'm anticipating success here. Okay. So 3.455. Let me get my paper. Okay, I got that noted. So now the tricky part, I have to put the clutch back on here. Get this back on here. Bolt in here, so I'll drop this whole thing. Daniel's probably watching right now going, where's the torque wrench? My torque wrench is actually at calibration, so I don't have one available right now. Alright, so now you need to measure the distance from the fingers of the clutch to the bell housing mating surface on the engine. Let me just make sure that you can see something here. Let me adjust. Okay, so now that your clutch is installed, what you want to do is measure the distance between the fingers on the clutch, that's this piece here, to the bell housing mating surface, which is this surface around the outside of the engine. And to do that, I'm going to use the caliper again. I'm going to use the straight edge. Now the straight edge is going to go across the outside of the clutch like this. And the fingers are recessed. So what you do, on the T56 you can take the bell housing off. It makes this measurement a lot easier to get. But on the TR6060 you can't. So what you do here is you measure the distance from your straight edge to the fingers. Right, which I was getting 0.141. That's what I was getting last time. So now, while you have this extended that much, you're going to press 0. Right, so now that deletes from your measurement the distance between the outer part of the pressure plate and the fingers. So now when you come back in here again, now you can come over here and you're starting at 0, but this is still out that much. So I'm going to use my knee to hold it because I'm one person. And then we'll take our measurement here. And I got 3.409. So let's go over to the paper. All right, so I got 3.409, and that's going to give us, now you're going to take, you always want to make sure that this measurement is bigger than this measurement here, which this is what we just took. This is the first one that we took. So the first number was 3.455, which is bigger than 3.409. So that's going to give us about 4 10,000ths, 0.04. What is that going to be? Hang on, let me math. Okay, so I mathed it up here. So our shim size, when I subtract this number from this number, so when I subtract the A measurement from the B measurement, I get 0.046. So when you come in here, it should be no more than 0.2. And ideally it would be 0.085 to, and they said they'd like to see no less than 0.625. So I'm going to need a 2 10,000ths shim to bring me into here. And if I want to bring it up into this range, I'm going to need a 4 10,000ths shim, 0.040. So that would bring me to 0.086, and that would be right in the ideal range there. So I do need a shim. So I am going to need a shim. So I'm going to order that shim. And again, I didn't have time to put it all together anyway, but now I know what's going on. And now that I know that the slave cylinder is working correctly, well, it's sized correctly, and it's not like a cheap Chinese one that's the wrong dimensions. So yeah, let me order up the shim, and I'm going to close this episode out because it's probably pretty long. But now you know how to install the billet sleeve guide from Monster, and we know how to shim the TR6060, which is a little more difficult than a T56. So thanks for watching. I do want to give one more shout out to Monster Clutch and Daniel over at the tech support. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. I couldn't ask for a better experience. Pretty much same day service. You know, they email me back within an hour. So let's order this shim up and get this car back together. Until next time, I'll see you later. Make sure you're liking and subscribed. and all that. And drop a comment just to tell me that you watched it, just to give me a comment. Helps the algorithm. See ya! Alright guys, I know I closed out the video, but I did go back and off camera I measured 3 times each measurement, and then I averaged my result. And what I came out with for my average clearance is 0.093, and Monster Clutch is looking for between 0.085 and 10 thousandths, so we're right in that ballpark. So I'm going to go ahead and send it as is, and I'm going to assemble it. That's going to be in the next video, but because I don't have time to do that today. But we're good to go on the slave cylinder. And again, thank you very much, Monster Clutch, for your awesome customer service. Subscribe, like, kitchen.